What happens when the strongest knight of the West becomes the bride of the very barbarian she was sent to destroy? An anime for the manga, The Barbarian's Bride is set to air sometime in October 2025, with Takashi Yamazaki, known for his work as an episode director on Blue Lock, taking the helm as director with Studio Jumondo animating. The story takes place in a continent where the kingdom of Ilodran, the West, have been at war with the eastern barbarian tribes for around 700 years, signifying an entrenched historical conflict, with the eastern tribes possessing a custom of capturing female knights and offering them marriage, a tradition that Serafina de Leviland, the strongest western knight, is thrust into. Sarah was previously sent on a mission to crush the barbarian tribes of the east, but when her campaign collapses, she's captured and taken alive. Expecting humiliation or death, she pleads for execution only for the tribe's chief, Weo, to shock her with an entirely different demand: marriage. What begins as a forced union slowly becomes a clash of cultures, honor, and emotions as Sarah discovers that her so-called enemies might not be as barbaric as she was taught. The core idea of creating such a world building is to propose a stark contrast between the two main cultures: the civilized West, represented by Sarah's homeland, and the barbaric East, home to Weo's tribe. While the Western Kingdom is a highly structured feudal society with a strong emphasis on chivalry, religion, and hierarchical order, reflected through Sarah's identity as a holy knight, bound by strict codes of conduct and duty. They are a nation who views the East through a lens of prejudice and superiority, seeing them as uncivilized and savage. On the other hand, the Eastern tribes are depicted as more communal, nature-oriented, with the supposedly barbaric label, a wrong information born of Western ignorance. Their culture is shown to be one of honor, loyalty, and deep connection to the land. This series doesn't rely on massive exposition dumps, but instead reveals the differences between the two cultures through the characters' daily interactions. What I liked was the exposition of the Eastern tribes' culture through their rich history, logical customs, and a deep connection to nature, which contrasts sharply with Sarah's rigid, class-based Western kingdom. This type of world building also helps to level the stakes of the romance, where now two literal nations are in the mix, depicting an enemy to lover, a true romance in adversity situation. The story begins after Sarah loses her battle to Weor, already in captivity and gradually understanding the nature of whom she actually was against. Much of the story centers on the slow evolution of Sarah's relationship with Weor. While she initially resists seeing him as an enemy, his behavior consistently contradicts her expectations, undermining her preconceptions of the barbarian way of life. This is all executed in the backdrop of the external conflict, her homeland's distrust of the East, the historical hostility between nations, and characters caught between the two worlds. So far, the setting and the world building do the job, but the characters are where things get shaky. All the perfect for an audience who do not really care for depth and realism in terms of character personality and just want to see them do the deed already. The characters have their cliche moments and personality. From the lens of the somewhat naive protagonist, Sarah, despite being the strongest female knight of the West, loses to Weor and is deemed to be his wife. Due to her discipline, proud, and driven by her duty to her kingdom nature, her initial arc revolves around her reconciling her knightly identity with her unexpected life among the barbarians, constantly doubting everything, but soon enough surprised at how everything in the East is different from how she imagined. But her acceptance of Weor's proposal and her shift in feelings happen a bit too quickly to feel entirely believable. The idea of being captured, especially as a female, is made sure to be represented, with the resolution of it being comedic and swift. But the growth of her character, where she learns to shed her bias and cultural prejudice, is certainly interesting. The chief of the barbarian tribe and Sarah's would-be husband Weor embodies the barbarian noble archetype. Contrary to the Western stereotype, although monstrously looking, Weir is a respectful, honorable, patient, and protective gentleman who, rather than following the custom, falls in love with Sarah through them fighting. What I did like was Weir's defining trait, his patience. He understands Sarah's initial fear and anger and never forces her to do anything, giving her space, treating her with respect, and allowing her to come to her own conclusions about his people. This approach is what makes their romance so wholesome, as he attempts not to tame, but to show her a different way of life, earning her trust and affection through his actions, not demands. But Weir is someone as a character who doesn't undergo a significant personal transformation, making his growth feel secondary as a foil for the growth of Sarah. The romance begins with a setup that, on the surface, is seemingly problematic and fraught with tension, a forced arranged marriage between a captive and her captor. However, the story immediately pivots from this potentially darker yet maybe more interesting trope to become a narrative between two people from vastly different worlds finding common ground. The romantic dynamic develops fast, with Sarah's worldview of black and white shattering thanks to the handsome, intelligent, and remarkably refined viewer who is the opposite of what Sarah was taught to fear. The romance has its strengths in it being clearly mutual, with Vio respecting Sarah's past and her identity as a knight, and Sarah in turn comes to respect his leadership and his people's way of life. Their relationship is a partnership of equals, not one based on dominance. The romance itself is quite wholesome and cliche, with Sarah's dignity coming off a rigid background, leading to Sundre moments and Vior acting as the outgoing, accepting man who finds this cute. The East also kind of fulfills Sarah's internal desire for an environment that treats her outside of just being the strongest knight, a kind of new family, and a sense of belonging in a place she once considered to be a land of savages. You can expect some amount of edgy as fan service, but nothing over the top, and the character designs, particularly the distinct facial features and a unique sense of fashion for the tribal members, are definitely a highlight of the series. Coming to what looks promising, with Studio Jumondo on board, the animation should be consistent and clean. The trailer looks good, and their work on the villainous level 99 was solid, proving they can handle fantasy titles with a focus on character interactions and a unique art style. But it's hard to analyze the director's capability when most of the experience comes from only working in storyboard, with Tanaka's most experience on Blue Lock, which was an absolute shit show, really not helping. The problematic premise is by far the biggest weakness I see the anime having. While I do feel that the manga somewhat successfully subverts the trope, the initial concept of a woman being captured and then marrying her captor is inherently uncomfortable for many. In addition is the rapid emotional acceptance by female captives, and although teasing centuries of war, the story prioritizes romance and character moments over exploring the deeper political or military stakes. In addition, is a somewhat idealized version of their society, with Sarah's Western kingdom shown to be clearly hypocritical, while the Eastern tribes portrayed as an almost uniformly kind and honorable people, avoiding the ethical gray areas that should exist. The entire narrative is built around the contrast between Sarah's expectations and viewer's reality, which can be repetitive, with the central joke of "I'm a barbaric warrior, but I'm actually a good guy" being the main source of humor and emotional payoff. All in all, The Barbarian's Bride is certainly entertaining, with a romantic marriage comedy on a premise that involves a rich world. I think it would land in the 7 to 7.5 my anime list range, with it not being a breakout but not a flop either. If you love enemies to lovers, romance, slow burn relationships, and stories that subvert common tropes, this is for you. Fans of shows like The Apothecary Diaries or My Happy Marriage will feel right at home. If you enjoyed this video, then do consider subscribing to my channel for more.